We saw Amy and Lindy working on a little performance routine with Harley and Spartan at the beginning of the episode. They made the decision to take a ride after they were finished. They then came across the local herd of wild horses at that point. Kaz, the leader of the herd, was one of them. He has a history of being hostile and kicking other horses out of the herd, and in this episode, we witnessed his rage flare up once more. Because a new horse trotted up to the herd while Lindy and Amy were keeping an eye on the wild horses. But Kaz angrily pursued the horse away rather than embracing it as a buddy. After Kaz chased the horse away, Lindy wanted to pursue it, but because it was getting cold, Amy made the decision to return home and search for the horse the next day. Amy and Georgie woke up early the following morning to go in search of the missing horse, so they left along with Lindy, who insisted on coming along as well. And after some looking, they discovered the horse. That was all well and good, but Lindy appeared to immediately become connected to the new horse. Naturally, Amy attempted to explain to Lindy that the horse already has an owner. To find out if anyone in the neighborhood had reported a lost horse, she had even called Scott earlier, but Lindy had a hard time accepting it. So much so that Lindy became very unhappy when Chandra Renfield, the real owner of the horse, whose name was Xavier, arrived the following day. It happened at a poor moment, too, since Lindy and Amy had just realized that the horse was naturally talented for Liberty work, because he had already been following Lindy as she ran side to side. To her credit, Amy did make an effort to persuade Lindy, assuring her daughter that Chandra presumably shares Lindy's passion for the horse. But Lindy didn't understand a word of it. Additionally, Chandra's request that Xavier stay at Heartland until she could pick him up the following evening didn't help because she was concerned that the horse would get bored at her home once more. Fortunately, Amy was able to cheer up her daughter by offering to sing during Lou and Peter's party. So she and Lindy practiced their routine while Amy rode Spartan and Lindy rode Xavier, and then they put on a spectacular display for everyone in attendance. This featured not only their family but also Chandra, who arrived to pick up her horse just in time for the performance, Lindy's new acquaintance Rebecca, her father Edwin, and their respective families. And after witnessing the connection that had grown between Lindy and Xavier, Chandra found it difficult to end their relationship and prevent Xavier from doing what he enjoys. She inquired as to Amy's approval of the horse's long-term residence at Heartland, which was a proposition Amy was unable to decline. Naturally, Lindy was overjoyed to learn that Xavier could stay at the ranch and immediately headed over to meet her. Amy is raising her kid alone, but as Jack noted at the episode's end, she is doing so with such dignity and strength. And if we're lucky enough to get a season 17 and beyond, I can't wait to see more of that. Lou had suggested at the close of the last episode that they have a vow renewal ceremony or something significant for their forthcoming anniversary. Therefore, we saw their interpretation of the ceremony in episode 15. Lou invited Rick, Carl, and Maddie, their infant daughter, to their celebration early on in the program. Peter was astonished to hear this, because up to that point, they had only discussed doing anything together, just the two of them and their girls on the pier at the Dude Ranch. Lou wanted to do something in front of their family and friends so that people would know that even though they don't have a conventional relationship, and even though they don't live together all the time, they still are committed to each other, just like any other couple. So it quickly became clear that this wouldn't be the case. Peter was aware that accepting it as it is will be the simplest course of action. The planning and preparations for the ceremony of recommitment were in full swing. Peter put up the entire Dude Ranch with white lights on their first anniversary and last year when they got back together. So Jack and Peter placed lights across the barn and the house. The two stood in front of the Heartland fireplace and renewed their vows to one another when it was time and all the guests were present. To celebrate, the entire family danced and ate. The celebration concluded with a lovely performance by Amy and Lindy that featured delicate gestures and fairy stories. Jessica asked Jack in this episode if he could move some of the boxes in the cellar, which she uses as her dark room, to develop her photographs, so she would have more capacity to fill all the holiday orders she was receiving in response to her success at the winter fair. For some reason that night, Jack began to have these odd nightmares in which he saw his younger self. The following morning, Jack and Alan Cotter met by chance while enjoying coffee at Maggie's. Alan also made fun of Jack for almost becoming related to him if Finn and Amy's romance had succeeded. That caused Jack to leave Maggie's in a rage before he even received the coffee he had come for. Later that day, when Jack went to clear a spot in the cellar for Jessica, he discovered his father's will in one of the boxes he was preparing to move. The existence of the will was a surprise in and of itself, because Jack was unaware that his father had ever drafted a last will and testament. But when Jack finally read it, he was astounded to discover that while his father had left Jack the Hartman Ranch and all of his other possessions, he had given Alan Cotter the fishing lodge and the whole parcel of land it is situated on. That completely shocked Jack. Jack was hardly speaking to Tim when they met at the barn the following morning. Tim reasoned that something was wrong because he was aware that he had not done anything to enrage Jack. Tim rode over to Jack as he was mending the fence line and inquired as to what was wrong. At that point, Jack informed Tim of the will. Jack had to make a choice since, as Tim had correctly pointed out, he couldn't simply ignore this will. Jack has another bizarre dream that evening. During it, Jack had a conversation with his younger self, who questioned the current Jack about the underlying cause of his continued rage against Alan Cotter. And for Jack, that chat helped to put a lot of things into perspective. As a result, Jack invited Alan to meet with him and confronted Alan about not just pursuing Lindy when he shouldn't have, but also about giving his father alcohol, despite the fact that Alan was aware of Jefferson Bartlett's drinking problem. After everything was said and done, Jack gave Alan the land title and the deed to the fishing cabin before leaving. Alan received what was properly his after he'd done what he believed to be right. Jack didn't think of his dad, Alan, or the cabin again after having that thought. Alan, however, appeared to the ranch at the episode's conclusion and told Jack the truth about everything. Alan acknowledged giving Jack's father alcohol at the fishing cabin despite knowing he shouldn't have. The only reason he did it, he added, was because Alan knew that it would make Jack's father like him, because Jefferson was the closest father figure Alan had ever known. He also returned Jack's fishing cabin, stating that it was associated with too many memories, not all of them positive. But before Alan could go, Jack made the decision to end their animosity and encouraged Alan to do the same, asking Alan to shake it off for good measure. One more intriguing event from this episode that I wanted to bring up occurred while Rick and Carl were conversing while Lou and Peter's party was going on. Rick's intention to run for mayor in the forthcoming election was also made public. Although Katie stated in this episode that no one else is in the running, it appears it may soon change. And if he does decide to run for mayor, and if there is a season 17, it will be fascinating to see how Rick and Lou's relationship would change. Lou now considers Rick to be her best friend, but if they are vying for the position of mayor, that will undoubtedly change. Finally, a handful of quick updates on a few of the season's unfinished plots. This episode gave an update on the Finn plot for everyone who was following it. Alan entered as Jack was receiving his coffee at Maggie's. Alan revealed that Finn is engaged at that point. It appears that Christie's plan to tell Finn what she knew about the accident in episode 12 was successful. They are giving their relationship another go because it really did change things between them. Amy was developing a new bond while Finn moved on. Because Amy and Rebecca's father Edwin agreed to put their old differences behind them and start over before her performance with Lindy. In episode 13, Lisa chose to acquire Platinum Bow out of her investors, and we later learned that she had completed all the paperwork at the bank. She will then possess Platinum Bow outright and no longer have to worry about her investors, which will relieve her of all their tension.